everyone, this is Christine from the Door Doctor, and today I'm really excited to be showing you this wreath. This is my pumpkin wreath. This is probably the #1 requested tutorial that I've had, and the main reason that I decided to start doing tutorials was because of this wreath and the requests that I got, to show how I put this one together. So we'll be doing this today. It's probably not my easiest wreath. It's not something that you can quickly throw together, but the level of difficulty isn't really that high. It's just got a number of steps. So you just have to kind of stick with me. It'll probably be the longest tutorial that I film, but it's well worth it in the end. All right, so first let's start with our supplies. So for this wreath, we use the Dollar Tree wire wreath pumpkin frame. It's got 6 of these vertical wires going up the front, and there's 2 on each side. We'll be using all of them with our petals today. And that gives you a nice 3-dimensional sort of look to the wreath when it's hanging on your door. It's really pretty. In terms of mesh, we're going to be using 2 colors mesh. This is poly burlap mesh, but certainly you could use other types of mesh and get a nice result as well. This is just plain old orange poly burlap. It's 10-inch wide roll. We're going to be cutting it into 10 by 10-inch squares, and you'll need 30 for the orange base of the pumpkin. And then I use olive green poly burlap mesh for the leaves and the stem, but you could certainly use other greens as well. This is also a 10-inch wide roll that we're going to be cutting into 5 squares of 10 by 10-inch poly burlap mesh. I get my mesh mostly at Craft Outlet, but there are plenty of other online vendors. Of course, I always use my 8-inch zip ties. I think these are very, very necessary for this wreath. I don't really think pipe cleaners will do it, but you could certainly try. I think you're going to get more durability if you use pipe cleaners for this one. And then for decoration, on the top of the pumpkin, I usually place ribbon, and so I use 2.5-inch wide wired ribbon. This one's also from Craft Outlet. It has very pretty pumpkin pattern to it, but certainly there's a whole range of things you could be creative using. And this roll is 10 yards as well, and usually I just unspool the whole thing and I cut it into 4 equal pieces. So you're going to use about 2.5 yards of the ribbon on the pumpkin. And then certainly it's nice to dress things up a bit, and you can do so with any type of floral pick. There's lots of nice berry picks that you can find online or in places like Michael's. This one I think is really cute. It has orange berries and little tiny pumpkins on it. It measures, let's see, from one end to the next, about 16 inches long. But we're going to be cutting off part of this and just using the base of the little berries to give you some decoration along the top. And then to hang it, I usually just use a little orange pipe cleaner. And then on the back, we'll cover all of our sins using just a piece of felt that I essentially just trace using the frame of the pumpkin. Okay? All right, so I'm going to take a quick break and then we'll start cutting our mesh. All right, so welcome back. I've already pre-cut all of my poly burlap squares for this project, but I've gotten some questions about how I cut my mesh. And so I'll share with you that for all my poly burlap, I use a wood burner, and I can include the link for my wood burner at the bottom of this video. But this one I bought on Michael's actually. There's also a similar version on Amazon, but this one comes in a pack with a number of different tips that you can use. I find this, I don't know if it really photographs well, but I use this chiseled tip, sort of a slanted tip for my mesh cutting. And this is just 1 speed, 1 heat level. It's just on off, so it's pretty simple to use. It gets very hot, so obviously be very careful cutting your mesh. Make sure you wear a mask because it gives off a lot of smoke. I'm not going to be using a mask so that you can hear me today, but I'll cut a few pieces of mesh for you. And then you also need to have some sort of a glass surface. Now, I have my cutting board. I'm obviously not going to cut directly on the cutting board, but this is my glass dining room table. So I usually cut my mesh right on top of my glass dining room table. I should probably slip this mat underneath the glass, but I've always just been a little too lazy to do it. So I tend to just measure on my measuring or on my cutting pad, and then I slide things over and cut them 10 inches. And, you know, it's a little bit more laborious, I think, you know, because you have to keep track of where you're supposed to be cutting. But it works for me. And so with poly burlap mesh, you know, it gives off a lot of smoke, but it cuts a nice line that'll burn or melt your mesh just a little bit, so it's not quite as easy to fray. And you're going to be trying to find a space in between these little squares to cut. And then you're just going to follow down in a line. So I'll do that again. So I'm just going to measure my 10 inches. I slide mine over, find my little row of squares, and then right down the middle. So easy. And then I like to, I've said this in other videos, I like to take a little craft brush, like a little craft paintbrush like this, and then just dot a little Mod Podge along the edge, the cut edge of my mesh. And then I set them to dry, and usually that just gives it a little extra durability. Certainly not a step that you have to do, but I just find like it's easier to work with the mesh once it's been burned with the wood burner and with a little bit of Mod Podge on the ends. Just makes it a little stiffer. All right, so let's start assembling this wreath. So let me grab my frame here, grab my zip ties, and we're going to start with the orange pieces first. So for this is going to be the Dean Michael sunflower or daisy petal that you've probably seen in other tutorials. And it's a really simple petal to use and looks lovely on this frame. And the way we're going to start is we're going to start by assembling petals on these front facing 6 vertical wires. We're going to leave the ones on the side to the end. And you're going to be assembling petals from left to right in a row starting from the bottom of the frame. And so we're going to do 1 row, then move up. Do a 2nd row, move up. 3rd row, move up. 4 rows total. So you're going to need 24 petals for this first part. And the reason I like to start from the bottom, go left to right, is it's just the way my petals fall against each other. So you'll see that the seamed edge of the petal will cover the raw edge as you go along. All right, so let's start with our petal. So you're going to take your 10 by 10 inch square, you're going to fold it into a triangle. Let me move my frame here. All right, make sure your edges line up, and then you're going to gather across the folded edge of your triangle. And I usually like to tuck under a little bit here and then gather away from me. Usually about 6 gathers. And then I just like to give it a little bit of shape like that. And then we're going to attach it to this. This is my left-hand side, this left-handed vertical wire. And placement, don't worry too much about it. We'll rearrange the placement of these rows in a bit, but usually I place it a couple inches from the bottom of the frame. So that's petal number 1. Let's do number 2. So again, you're gonna fold your triangle. And then gather along the folded edge. And shape that a bit. All right, I think that's okay. And then in terms of placement, we're going to place this on the 2nd vertical wire. And I usually like to shape that petal one more time before I really pull down on that zip tie. All right, number 3. I'll start moving a little faster here. So fold your triangle, make sure all the edges or the seams line up, and then gather along that folded edge. See, sometimes I don't like it when the back side of the petal shows, so I'll regather that one. It's a little obsessive, I think, but I like them to be perfectly even. And we'll apply this to the third vertical wire. All right, move these scissors out of the way. Let's do number 4. Fold a nice triangle, and then gather. And you should start to see, if I can get this back into view, that each of these petals, as they're placed, you have the seamed edge of your mesh covering the last petal's raw edge. Just gives it a nicer finished look. So this will be number 4. And number 5. Shape that. And this is where I like my 8-inch zip ties, because they're just long enough that I don't have to fuss too much. Certainly you can use shorter. This is just my own personal preference. All right, and then this will be number 6. And we'll pause a minute just to look at that row. All right, now I'm just going to cut all my zip ties and give you a better view of this. All right, so row 1. I'll flip this around for you. And so you've got 6 petals along the front. They're probably more than, probably 2 to 3 inches from the bottom along the back. And now we're going to start row 2. Same thing, second row, left to right, third row, and then a 4th row. And so I'm going to break away. I'll come back when I'm a little bit closer to the top. But again, you're going to do 3 more rows exactly as you did this first row along these front 6 wires. Okay, be back soon. All right, so I'm back, and you can see that I've completed 3 rows. We'll do row 4 together. And I just wanted to show you the back of the wreath just so you can get a sense of spacing for each of these rows. The bottom row starts about 3 inches from the base of the wreath, or this, this bottom wire of the wreath. And then each subsequent row, I'd say 2 to 3 inches above that. And you're gonna add the 4th row, similarly 3 to 4 inches above it, but you're going to place most of them closer to the top. You're going to leave a little space for your green petals, but these 2 outer orange rows, you're really going to have it right up against the top of the wire wreath. But we're going to be placing some green petals on these 2 wires, so those should be a little bit lower than the top. This one can be all the way up to the top as well as this one. So let's do row 4 so that you can see that. I'm not sure I explained that very well, but show and tell. So let's do row number 4, and then we'll do the sides together too. I always leave the side rows of petals to the end. I'm not sure why, really. I mean, I guess you could put them on at the same time as the front-facing rows. I just never have. There. Gather right along that folded edge. And this is, you know, obviously you do a lot of pumpkin wreaths with orange, but I'm not sure why you have to stick with orange. I had a customer who wanted a pink pumpkin, pink and green, and that turned out lovely. It was so cute. I was thinking of doing one for Halloween. Orange, but maybe with some more black in it. Haven't done that yet though. But I guarantee you nobody on your block will have this wreath. This is, or at least not this particular pumpkin wreath. Certainly the Dollar Tree pumpkin frames are out there and have been out there for a while, but I haven't seen too many that look quite like this, so pretty. All right. Let's say, shape that a bit. All right. And I think, you know, the three-dimensional shape of the frame is what really makes it, you know, but the size is also nice too. So especially with the petals on it, it looks very full. All right, this is number 6, and then I'm going to adjust the placement of the petals just a little bit. I can find my scissors here. All right, so there we are, 4 rows. 4 rows, 6 petals on each row, so 24 total. I think what I'll do on the back here is I'm going to move these 2 up a little bit, move this one up a little bit, leave some space for petals on these 2 middle ones, move this guy up, and some of their friends will come up too here. Move those up a little bit. And the reason why I want to fill it all out and bring these up to the top is you don't want to see the zip ties at the end. And so the top row, if you bring these up, you'll have the leaves covering the zip ties, so you should mostly cover all the white. And then all the others, I just make sure are pretty evenly spaced, okay? All right, we'll flip that over. Make sure all of my finished seams are covering all of my raw seams, and it looks pretty good. All right, so now we're gonna do the sides of the pumpkin. I mean, this is already pretty full as it is, but you really do wanna cover up these naked sides here. And we're going to place 3 petals up each side, so 6 total, 3 on one side, 3 on the other. And it's the same petal type, and you're going to just simply attach 1, 2, 3, and evenly space them. I place the top petal right up against this other guy here. These 2 are going to meet together again so that the zip ties are going to get covered by the green leaves. So on each side, 1, 2, and 3. All right, so we can do that together. It's a little hard to show this because you have to sort of tuck them away on the side there. They kind of bump up against the table here, but I'll do my best. I think I'll sit down for this part. And I go from the bottom to the top, so stuck one, first one, if I can show it to you. Stuck that first one in there, and I'm gonna place it right there. And then I'll do 2, and then number 3. So So I'm just gonna go ahead and do those two, and then I'll show you once I'm done. Number 3. I suppose you could do 4 and really fill in the space. This just seemed to be the right spacing for all the petals. You know, somebody asked me why 4 rows of petals, and I don't know, I think it just, you know, you can see each lower row better. They just have a nice space in between them. One roll of mesh makes about, you know, 35 squares, and so you can do this with just one single row of orange. All right, so here's our 3 going up the side there. And I usually just tuck them behind this first row so that the finished seam is covering the raw seam there. And now we're gonna do this side, our final 3. Almost there. I'm gonna stand up for this. Number 2. Finally, number 3. All right. All right, mission accomplished. The body of the pumpkin is done. Now I usually just like to step back, take a breather, but also make sure the placement of all my petals is where I want it. Okay, so now you can see all 30 laid out, including these side rows here. The side rows kind of cup the middle ones. And so again, the bottom row about 3 inches, and then each subsequent row 2 to 3 inches above that, making sure that these 2 outer, or rather the 3 outer metal wires are pushed all the way to the top. So 1, 2, 3, all the way up to the top. You're going to be placing green petals on these 2 middle ones, and so you're going to leave those here blank. All right. So now let's do our green petals. So you need to make 5 olive green 10 by 10 inch squares, but you're only going to have 4 petals, and the 5th square is going to be the stem. Okay. And this type of petal is a little different than the Dean Michael petal. You're going to take your 10 by 10 inch square and shape it like place it in front of you in a diamond configuration. So you have 1 point towards your midsection, 1 point away. You're going to have those 2 points meet in the middle of the square. And then you're going to gather across the middle from one end to the next, or one end to the other. Like that. Almost looks like a little bow tie. And then you're going to bend this with your finger right in the middle there, so that you have 1 sort of tear-shaped petal over the other, okay? And the first one, I mentioned that we're going to have 2 petals in the middle here, but the first one is actually going to go, if I can show this, is going to go along this wire here, right at the base of the stem. So I'm going to place it parallel to that wire and zip tie it. I'll show you in a second. All right. All right, hopefully you can see that. My cutting board's kind of obscuring. So here's the stem, and there's this sort of horizontal wire here. So you're gonna place one here, the third here, and a fourth one this way. And you can see that the draping of the petal covers slightly the zip tie underneath. All right, let's do another. Diamond shape, 2 points meet in the middle, gather across the middle, make your little bow tie, flip it over, right at the gathering. Where you gather them is sort of like a little pivot point. So you're gonna bend it in the middle there. Make 2 teardrop shaped petals, one over the next. And then this time I'm gonna attach this one to this vertical wire right above one of the orange petals. This one sits right at the base here of your pumpkin stem. So that's number 2. We'll do number 3. And certainly you can add more petals. I mean, if you wanted to, you could put them all the way along this horizontal piece of metal here. Add an extra row vertically. Let's do number 4. Take my diamond, meet the points in the middle, gather across the middle, make my bow tie, flip it, pivot, 2 teardrops, and that'll go on this horizontal piece of the frame. And that'll be our final leaf. All right, let me swivel this around here. And so, I think I placed this first one a little too far back, but if you place it far enough to the front, you'll have this nice sort of fanned out arrangement of your leaves. And so 4 of them, 1, 2, 3, 4 across the top. And that's the base of your pumpkin. Obviously you need to shape it up a little bit, but in terms of size, if you place all the petals in that general configuration, you know, it's about, let's say 21 inches across, 22 inches across. And then in terms of height, you know, once the stem is on, that's going to be about 18 inches tall. So it gives a really nice full look. All right, so now I'm going to take a quick break, and then the next step, we're going to be placing our hook and the berries along the top. Then that'll be followed by the stem and then the bow at the end. So I'll see you back here in a couple of minutes. All right, welcome back. So now we're moving up our pumpkin towards the top here, where we're going to add all of our decoration and really start to finish it off. First, we're going to add this nice berry pick. Let me move this out of the way so you can see it better. I bought these on Amazon. I just stumbled across it. It's really cute. But you can certainly find these in any floral craft store, Hobby Lobby, Michael's, you name it. You could do greenery, berries, flowers, get creative, go wild, right? This particular pick, it's wired like many of them are. And this one separates nicely into 3 sections. And so I like it because I can have them arranged so that they look like they fan out across the top of the pumpkin. So generally what I do is I kind of separate the 3 pieces a little bit here. And then I'm going to bend this like this. All right, bend it. Whoops, let me show it that way. And I'm going to end up basically threading this through the base of my stem and zip tying it in. But first I want to cut all of this extra. I don't need all this wire. So I'm just going to take my wire cutter, take a big generous piece off of that. So it's a little shorter and it won't stick out over the stem of the pumpkin. And so I'm just going to, see if I can show this better. I'm just going to slip it in, or really just place it actually on top of the pumpkin. And then I'm going to zip tie this. You know I love my zip ties, so I'm going to zip tie the stem of the wire from the berry pick to the stem of the pumpkin frame. And then I'm also going to zip tie this lateral branch, if you will, to the frame over here. And then I'll probably do the same with this side frame. I'm not sure. We'll have to see how it looks. So let me first get out my zip ties. And actually, I usually like to zip tie it on this one. Let's separate these a little more. There we go. Love my zip ties. I love my zip ties and I love my hot glue. Those both come in handy in this final segment of this. I'll show you this in a minute. I just have to twist it towards me so I can put this on properly. And we'll do 3 zip ties there. And then 2 zip ties along the side here. Sort of helps redirect these branches the way I want them to go, gives it a little bit more strength, but certainly you don't have to do all of these zip ties if you don't want. All right. And you can add a second wire pick of berries, make it nice and full. Okay, so I'll try to show you what I've done here a little closer. So I've done the base of this wire with 3 zip ties here, and then I added a 4th and a 5th to each of these sort of lateral branches. All right, so there's one there and then one there. And then, you know, you just kind of arrange these however you want them. Like I said, you could add 2 or 3. All right, and this one kind of comes down the center. And remember, you're going to add the stem that's going to cover the zip ties, so you shouldn't see them. And then you're going to add the bow, as big a bow as you want, right? And that can cover a million sins on the top of a wreath. And so there. All right, so it's just going to sort of splay out like that in the front of the pumpkin. Then I usually like to apply my hanger next. And this is just as plain old pipe cleaner. So I bend it in half. It's sort of a V shape. And then I bend it again on each arm, if you will, to make it a W shape. Okay. And then I'm going to thread that through my pumpkin frame. so that it makes a little hook, and these two little arms of the W, if you will, sort of snake under the frame, right where the base of the pumpkin stem sort of sits. And then I'm going to twist this behind here. Put one arm that way, the other arm of the W thread through here, pull them tight. And you'll see sort of almost like a little looped knot. And then I just twist these. You can twist them, you know, you can twist them around the frame like this. Remember, your felt backing is going to go on here, so you shouldn't see any of these little loose ends. Mainly, you just want this to be in there pretty strong. And I try to make the loop long enough that you can hang it, but short enough so that it's not going to stick out over the stem. Okay. All right. So now the next step is going to be doing the stem. And the stem is just one single square of green poly burlap mesh, and we're going to glue it to the base. We're going to glue it to this pumpkin stem. And so I usually move my hanger. I just kind of push that down, get it out of the way. We're going to be working on the back of this wreath. And you're going to take your square poly burlap mesh and you're just going to fold it in half just once. And what I like to do is I like to have the two finished seams as the top of the pumpkin stem. And so let me move this in here. And we're just going to glue this into place. And usually what I like to do is I like to apply glue in a line where my zip ties are. I'm just going to move the zip ties a little bit. And then you're going to wrap it around. Pretty easy. So let me see, get my glue gun here. And again, I'm very generous with the glue. The zip ties and the wire from the berry stem gives you some thickness to apply your glue. And I do apply a little bit on this black wire, just a thin little dot. Oops. This is probably the trickiest part. All right. And so you have your folded mesh. I just kind of come around and put the raw seam of that folded mesh right over my glued line. And of course I forgot my finger protectors for this part, but just be careful. It's easy to glue your fingers to this, but you want to push that a little bit until it kind of holds, and then you're just going to wrap around. Really easy. As tight or as loose as you want, but you want to finish in the back. So you can see that mostly my last little bit is going to come around the back here. And then we're just going to glue that. I really could use my finger protectors now, but we will make do. And try to go slow. Pull this tight. And then if I had my finger protectors, I would reach in and give it a little squeeze from inside too. So you want to really push down hard on this. And so you can use both fingers to kind of almost clamp it. Okay. And just glue in a line all the way up to the tip. And don't worry too much about this kind of overhang. We're going to trim that away. All right. And this doesn't have to be, I don't know, I think the pumpkin stem should look a little imperfect, you know? It's okay if it's going off to the side a bit. All right. Just gonna hold that. And don't worry, I haven't burned my fingers yet. or at least not today. I've burned my fingers plenty of times doing these wreaths, but not today. All right, so we're gonna let that sit for a little bit. And then, you know, anything that hasn't been glued that's sort of flopping here free, I just trim. And I trim, you know, you try not to go too crooked. I just try to trim along the little squares, much like you would if you were melting the mesh with your wood burner. And so you're going to have this hopefully nice seam down the back that's all been glued nicely. And then sometimes I even add a little bit of Mod Podge to these frayed ends here so that it won't come loose. And then I'll actually put a little Mod Podge along the top here and let that dry just to give it a little bit extra strength. And so that's where we are so far. Cute. And now I'm going to take a quick break to just kind of glue this on. I usually, I should say, I actually add, you might wonder if this is enough glue to hold this stem in place. And what I will do is I will add a little glue here, usually in the back because you don't want to see it in the front. But I'll usually add some generous glue along the bottom here and let that dry. And it's usually, you can see it's already pretty tight. But if you add another little bit of glue around here, it shouldn't really budge. Okay, so let me take a quick break. I'm going to get my ribbon, and then we'll put on the last finishing touches. All right, welcome back. We're in the home stretch now, and this is really just the finishing of this wreath. Hopefully you've stuck with it. If you've made it this far, there's not that much left to go. I did take a step away to find my finger protectors. If you don't have a set of these, my goodness, you should get them. They're like little rubber thimbles for your index and thumb, and I would not have fingertips anymore if I didn't have these to protect me when I'm hot gluing. So I think I got a pack of like 5 sets of these or 5 pairs of these on Amazon for about $8 or $9, so they're worth having. So back to the wreath. So I've glued my stem, I've let it dry. I've added a healthy bit of glue to the base there. You might be able to see it. And now we're gonna add our ribbon and our felt backing, and you're all ready to hang it. So this again is 2.5-inch wired ribbon from Craft Outlet. I've cut it into an approximate 2.5 yard length, but certainly you can make that shorter, longer if you want. Add extra ribbon if you want a fuller ribbon. I just use the single ribbon. And in terms of the shape of the ribbon, for me, I don't use a bow maker. I usually do this by, I just visually make the different loops to my bow, but you're going to have 1 little loop in the middle and 2 loops on each side, and then the tails of your ribbon. And so I've already cut my ribbon into a 2.5 yard length. Usually what I like to do is, so I'll start with the little loop, forming a little loop in the middle. I'm going to pinch it in the back. And I think the diameter of this is probably about 2 inches, 2.5 inches wide. And then because this is one-sided ribbon, I have to twist it to keep the picture, or the pretty part, facing the front. So I twist it. I don't know if you can see that twist in the back. And then make my loop. And the first loop is my smallest loop, and I think I make that, let's see. Again, I always do this by eye. This one's about 4 inches long. I'm going to twist again in the back, and then make my second loop, hopefully the same length as my first. I'm getting this all caught in my pumpkin. So let's see. Yeah, about 4. And then twisting it each time in the back. The second loop, so this is actually the first 2 loops. All right. The second loop is just slightly longer than the first, maybe by 1/2 inch. So let's see. So that's going to be my second loop. I just want it to peek out from behind the first. And twist that in the back. There. Hard to hold on to all of this. I suppose a bow maker would be easier, but I guess I'm just stubborn. All right, so then let's make sure this is about the same as this side. pull that up there. So my 2 loops. So first, second, third. And then I'm going to twist it one more time in the back. All my little twists are there. And then the rest, all of this is going to be tail. And so I'm just going to take the final end, bring it up here, like that. Let it dangle for a second. I take a zip tie, thread it through the middle. Don't let go. Done that before. And then zip tie all my twisted pieces back here with the zip tie. So that should not go anywhere. Cut that. All right. So it should start to look like that. And then you're just going to stretch this out, cut it down the middle into 2 pieces. All right, take a look here, see if I like it. Looks pretty good. And you've got your 2 edges, your 2 tails, which I'll just dovetail with my scissors here. So just fold each end of your ribbon in half, and then just make a little notch with your scissors. Oops, that was loud, sorry about that. And then the other end. There. So there is your ribbon. And as usual, I love my zip ties, so we're going to zip tie this to our wreath. All right, I'm going to flip it over here. Placement is going to be right smack in the center, and it's a little tricky to show this, but you're basically going to, what I like to do is I like to thread my zip tie through the middle loop of the bow and then back into the frame. So I actually start in this large sort of gap here. Let me get the hanger out of the way. This large gap here in the wreath, and I go from back to front. So you put the zip tie from the back of the wreath out, poking the front. You're going to loop it through the middle loop of your bow, come up and back down into the wreath. You're gonna encounter a lot of structures here, from your wire wreath frame to your berries, but stick with it. You're gonna stick it through. Hopefully, let me pull this up here so you can see how I kind of put the end of the zip tie through the base of the pumpkin stem, and then we're gonna attach it. All right, flip this guy around. Make sure you've got your ribbon on straight-ish. Make sure your tails are where you want them to be, sort of covering any blank spaces where your mesh doesn't lie. And then you're just gonna tighten this. Tighten it as much as you want. Tightening it gives the bow a nice little, I don't know, just kind of perks it up, stands it up a little bit, like that. All right, so there we go. Cut my zip tie back here. And honestly, this is the home stretch. The only thing you have left to do at this point is to add the felt backing. And that's just, you know, you're gonna lie this nice and flush with your frame. I have a nice little, let me pull it out here, hole puncher. It's this nice little teeny tiny hole puncher. It makes sort of pin-sized holes. And so I usually just go around with my zip ties, punching holes and threading my zip ties through. I usually do one at the bottom, a couple up here towards the top. You don't want too many zip ties, but you do want this to be neat and tidy. Again, it's, you know, meant to hide your sins. It's not meant to create more sins. You don't want so many zip ties that it's going to be scratching people's doors. All right, so usually I'll do one here, another one here. I've done enough of these that I feel like I could do this in my sleep. Put all these zip ties on. And then we'll move along to the side. And usually I like to make sure the spacing of these rows is just enough so I can get a zip tie right here in between these bottom two petals on the side here. And then I usually work my way up and do another two. One here, if you can see, and then one kind of tucked underneath the green leaf there. All right, flip this guy around. I'm creating a tidal wave of zip ties all over my table, which you probably can't see, but you can hear in the background. All right, couple more, and then we are done. And then the last one up top here. So usually I place all my zip ties loosely, and then I go around and I kind of evenly tighten them. I don't know how to explain that. I want to make sure that the wire is covered and that it's more or less even going around the whole frame. And we've covered any pieces of poly burlap, any zip ties from the actual wreath. Tuck that guy in under there. And we're going to cut all these. Like that. And then I just like to tuck my little zip tie ends underneath so that they don't scratch your door. All right, the top ones are always a little tougher. I'm not gonna struggle too much with those today. Just gonna tuck them lightly in. And so there's the back of your wreath, nice and pretty, but more importantly, let's turn this around and show you the front of your wreath. Let's get that beauty all in the shot. Hard to, it's a big wreath, but there you go. Goodness, if you made it this long, congratulations for sticking in there. But I hope you like this tutorial. I mean, I think this is Very unique, lovely wreath. Get lots of use out of it. So good luck making it. Take care, guys.